The Aetolian Council made a surprising decision by passing a decree that invited Antiochus to intervene in Greece and resolve the ongoing tensions between the Aetolians and Rome. Antiochus clearly understood that accepting such an invitation could easily trigger open conflict with the Romans. However, rejecting it would have severely damaged his reputation and authority. When the Aetolians assured him that they would provide military assistance, Antiochus agreed to bring his forces into Greece. Later Roman writers accused Hannibal of encouraging Antiochus toward war, but at this stage Hannibal was still far away in Syria and could not have played a direct role. The opening act of the conflict was initiated by the Aetolians themselves. Their troops assassinated the deeply unpopular Spartan ruler Nabis, hoping to take control of Sparta and use it as leverage against the Achaean League. Instead, the population of the city rose up against them, forcing the attackers to withdraw. With Sparta left defenseless, the Achaean League quickly moved in and compelled the city to join their alliance, permanently ending Spartan independence and closing a historic chapter in Greek history. Despite this setback, the Aetolians remained determined. To provide Antiochus with a secure base of operations, they seized the strategically important city of Demetrius, whose harbor was among the finest in Greece. Antiochus possessed only a modest fleet, insufficient to transport all his troops at once. After performing a ritual sacrifice to Athena at Ilium, he began crossing the Aegean Sea in the autumn of 192 BC. The overland route through Thrace and Macedon was deliberately avoided, as Antiochus did not wish to provoke Philip V into joining the Roman side. Landing safely at Demetrius, Antiochus advanced southward to Lamia, where the Aetolian assembly formally welcomed him as a liberator and appointed him commander of the League. Yet this honor placed Antiochus in an uncomfortable position. Roman forces were not yet present in the region, and as the self-proclaimed liberator of Greece, he could not openly attack Greek cities. As a result, the Seleucid king lacked a clear enemy to confront. Once again, he turned to diplomacy in search of allies. His first attempt was directed at Chalcis, a crucial city guarded by Attalid and Achaean troops since the end of the Second Macedonian War. Although Antiochus had sufficient strength to seize it by force, he refused to shed Greek blood and withdrew instead. Envoys were subsequently dispatched to Athens, Macedon, the Achaean League, and the Athenians. The Athenians agreed to support him, while Philip V remained cautious and the Achaeans stayed loyal to Rome. In Athens, internal political divisions erupted into violent clashes, ending with the defeat of Seleucid supporters. Rome responded by sending the praetor Marcus Baebius to Apollonia with more than 20,000 Roman and Italian troops. Although these forces outnumbered Antiochus, Rome avoided formally declaring war. Nevertheless, Baebius' presence restrained Macedon, and when Chalcis requested aid, 500 Roman legionaries were dispatched to reinforce the city. This moment marked a turning point for Antiochus. Convinced that diplomacy had failed, he ordered his admiral Polixenidas to seal the narrow Euripus Strait separating Chalcis from mainland Greece, while he personally led the rest of his army south. When a Roman detachment arrived at the crossing, it found the route blocked by the Seleucid fleet and was forced to continue toward Delium in search of transport ships. There, the Roman unit was surrounded and annihilated by Seleucid forces. This clash effectively ignited the conflict later known as the Seleucid War, the Syrian War, or the War of Antiochus. Some Roman sources claim war had already been declared, but the official announcement reached Antiochus only after the fighting at Delium. Despite this success, Antiochus still hoped to secure allies among the Achaeans and Pergamon. In a calculated gesture, he allowed the Chalcis garrison to withdraw peacefully under a truce. Shortly afterward, the rest of Euboea submitted to his authority. He then turned his attention toward central Greece. The cities of the Boeotian League offered little resistance and surrendered quickly, followed by the Thessalian League, which had been established by Rome after the Second Macedonian War. Antiochus initially attempted negotiations, but he soon realized that Thessalian leaders were secretly mobilizing their forces while talks continued. Acting decisively in early 191 BC, he struck first. His army seized Pherae, the League's principal city, and massacred its defenders. From there, he launched a rapid campaign across Thessaly, capturing nearly every city in the region. Only Larissa resisted, forcing Antiochus to lay siege to the stronghold. While operations continued at Larissa, Antiochus dispatched 2,000 soldiers south to the battlefield of Cynocephaly. In a symbolic act, these troops buried the remains of fallen Greek warriors still scattered across the field. The gesture was intended to portray Antiochus as a pious protector of Hellenic tradition, contrasting himself with what he presented as Roman brutality and Macedonian neglect. Instead of winning admiration, the act offended Philip V of Macedon, who interpreted it as a deliberate insult and promptly reaffirmed his loyalty to Rome. The Roman commander Baebius quickly capitalized on this shift. He opened negotiations with Philip and secured Macedonian cooperation, including permission for Roman troops to move freely through Macedonian territory. A 2,000-man detachment led by Appius Claudius advanced south, likely on a reconnaissance mission. According to ancient accounts, Claudius reached the Tempe Valley and constructed a sprawling camp filled with extra campfires, exaggerating Roman numbers. Whether Antiochus withdrew because he was deceived by this display or because worsening weather and supply shortages made the siege untenable, he soon lifted the blockade of Larissa and retreated to Chalcis. Both sides paused operations over the winter. While in Chalcis, Antiochus pursued another dynastic strategy by marrying the daughter of a local noble. He likely intended to reassure minor Greek elites that he stood with them rather than with distant Eastern interests. However, the plan backfired. Many Greeks viewed such marriages with suspicion, believing indulgence weakened martial discipline. The celebrations further damaged Antiochus' reputation when guests were scandalized by the Macedonian custom of drinking undiluted wine, a practice the king openly embraced. Despite continued diplomatic efforts and requests for reinforcements from Asia, Antiochus failed to gain new allies. Meanwhile, Rome moved with purpose. Alliances with the Aegean League, Pergamon, and Rhodes were reaffirmed. Manius Acilius Glabrio, a political ally of Scipio Africanus, was appointed consul and entrusted with leading a new army of 15,000 men into Greece. Demonstrating the importance of the campaign, two former consuls, Marcus Porcius Cato and Valerius Flaccus, were selected as legates, signaling unity across Roman political factions. As Roman forces crossed into Greece, Baebius and Philip V launched joint operations to eliminate Seleucid garrisons in Thessaly. Resistance collapsed rapidly. The Athenians were defeated, and remaining Seleucid positions fell one after another, erasing nearly all of Antiochus' earlier gains. Outnumbered more than 2-1 and cut off from reinforcements due to enemy naval activity in the Aegean, Antiochus could no longer maintain his position. Unwilling to abandon the Aetolians yet unable to hold central Greece, Antiochus withdrew south. Rejecting a static defense at Lamia, which risked encirclement, he chose Thermopylae, a narrow pass famous for its defensive potential. Flanked by mountains on one side and the sea on the other, it offered a natural choke point. Yet history had already shown that its hidden paths could turn strength into vulnerability, a lesson Antiochus was soon destined to relearn. Both armies were deeply shaped by Greek history, legends, and shared military traditions, and every commander on the field understood this heritage well. Leaving several thousand Aetolians behind to secure the vital town of Heraclea, Antiochus marched with roughly 12,000 infantry and barely 500 cavalry. Facing Roman horsemen who outnumbered his own by 4-1, the Seleucid king had no choice but to fight in a narrow mountain corridor where superior Roman mobility could not be used to surround him. To secure his position, Antiochus dispatched 2 Aetolian contingents, each 1,000 hoplites strong, to block the most important mountain routes. He reinforced the main gate with a defensive wall, mounting catapults and ballistae along its crest. Skirmishers occupied elevated ground to the left of the pass, hurling missiles down upon any Roman advance, while the phalanx assembled in front of the fortifications, screened by peltasts. The Romans, meanwhile, had only two-thirds of their army present, the remainder guarding Thessaly and maintaining the blockade of Heraclea. Glabrio understood that forcing a frontal breakthrough against a phalanx in such terrain was nearly impossible, yet an attack was unavoidable. He needed to pin the Seleucid army in place. Two detachments, led by Cato and Flaccus and each numbering 2,000 legionaries, were ordered to seize the surrounding mountain passes. Some accounts suggest that Aetolian raiders struck the Roman camp before the battle, compelling Glabrio to leave behind cavalry and infantry to defend it. Ancient sources disagree on many details of the fighting. What is certain is that Flaccus was instructed to capture the pass at Mount Tychius during the night. Some writers claim his men lost their way, while others report that they encountered determined Aetolian hoplites. The legionaries failed to break through, suffered heavy losses, and withdrew. Cato's assault at Mount Calidromus proved far more effective. Roman troops reportedly surprised Aetolians while they slept, killing many in the initial strike. The defenders soon rallied, forming a solid line across the pass, and a fierce stalemate followed. At the same time, the main Roman force advanced directly through the choke point. Seleucid skirmishers and peltasts inflicted casualties, and artillery fire tore through the ranks, yet Roman discipline held. Shields locked, the legionaries pressed forward. As the Romans closed in, Antiochus pulled back his peltasts and advanced the phalanx. Here the fighting turned deadly. Roman soldiers could not reach the sarissa-armed ranks, nor could they maneuver around them. Slowly and relentlessly, the phalanx forced the legions backward. By early morning, however, Cato's troops gained the advantage at Calidromus. Outnumbering the Aetolians 4-1, he rotated fresh soldiers into the fight until the hoplite line finally collapsed. Once broken, the defenders fled in panic. Roman legionaries pursued them onto the plain, cutting them down without mercy. News of the breakthrough spread quickly. The Seleucid phalanx realized its rear was exposed. Antiochus attempted to rally his men, but discipline dissolved. The army retreated toward camp in hopes of reforming. Cato's detachment reached the camp first, followed closely by the main Roman force, denying the phalangites any chance to reorganize. The battle descended into chaos. Antiochus escaped with his cavalry, abandoning the rest. Over 10,000 Seleucids and Aetolians were killed or captured. Livy reports Roman losses of 200, though this figure is likely understated. After resting for a day, the Romans turned on Heraclea itself. The fortress was formidable, protected by the river Asopos, Mount Ida, and a hilltop citadel. Though small, its walls were fully manned by a determined Aetolian garrison, and their low height prevented the Romans from exploiting their numerical advantage. Glabrio demanded surrender from the commander Democritus. He refused. The Romans prepared for siege, building battering rams and assault equipment. Initial attacks failed as narrow approaches limited the assault. Defenders sallied out, burned rams, and drove attackers back with spears. Fresh Roman troops renewed the attack day after day, while the exhausted garrison had no relief. After 23 days, Glabrio devised a new plan. Roman troops were deliberately ordered back to their camp, creating the impression that no assault was planned. This deception lulled the weary Aetolians into a false sense of security, and many abandoned the city walls to rest inside their homes. Under cover of darkness, a selected group of Roman legionaries was instructed to attack a specific section of the fortifications and create as much noise as possible. At the same time, the Roman commander Glabrio ordered his legate, Tiberius Sempronius, to secretly move his contingent toward another vulnerable stretch of the defenses. The sudden noise jolted the Aetolians awake, and they rushed back toward the walls, managing to repel the initial Roman assault. However, while their attention was focused on the distraction, the second Roman force had already begun scaling the ramparts with ladders. Realizing they were about to be overrun, the Aetolians abandoned their positions entirely and withdrew into the citadel. Once the city fell, Glabrio allowed his soldiers to plunder it, but quickly turned his attention to the remaining stronghold. Roman engineers constructed siege engines on a nearby hill, positioning catapults to bombard the citadel, while infantry units formed a tight encirclement. The defenders faced a hopeless situation. Food supplies were nearly exhausted, and they lacked any means to counter the Roman artillery. With no realistic chance of relief or resistance, Democritus surrendered. Although exact figures are unknown, it is possible that Roman casualties during the capture of Heraclea exceeded those suffered at the Battle of Thermopylae. Following the defeat, Antiochus retreated to Chalcis. While he briefly considered holding Euboea as a strategic foothold, this plan collapsed when Glabrio advanced south, forcing the Boeotian League into submission. At the same time, the Roman fleet under Aulus Atilius destroyed a Seleucid supply convoy near Andrus, cutting off vital support. By May of 191 BC, Antiochus began his withdrawal to Asia. His failure in Greece stemmed from several factors. Roman diplomacy and logistics proved superior. Most Greek states rejected his claim of liberation, and even his Aetolian allies failed to fully commit their forces. Lacking sufficient troops to pursue Antiochus across the sea, Glabrio instead renewed his campaign against the Aetolians. He captured Lamia, increasing pressure on the League. Although Antiochus sent funds to sustain resistance, the Seleucid position continued to deteriorate. Garrisons were evacuated, territories fell to Achaean control, and Glabrio's siege of Naupactos ended only when Flamininus arrived to negotiate another ceasefire.